5057 RA, 120 millimeter, 18 bolt final drive with an 18 bolt differential and ring and pinion. So factory, this is only found on the 9R. This would be considered currently this would be considered extra heavy duty because it has all of the upgrades through all of the older generation axles. Your top two small holes are for your brakes. Your middle hole is for your diff lock. These are just pusher bolt holes. We've started doing the OEM program, which doesn't include the yoke because there's different yokes, so it doesn't make any sense for us to set. We use one to do the bearing setup, but then you would just install yours to spec. I do have a tip here that if your yoke has a groove in it, we do have a sleeve that goes on there, saves you 600 bucks, and it works just great. So the axle ID on the final drive is going to have 4 ID grooves. The easiest way to tell on your tractor, if it was required that you have a 120 millimeter axle, is that 3 bolt combination, which is found on all 4 corners of the final drive. You can measure this if you like, but all you can do is know that it is not 5 inches and it's over 4.5. You know, round's hard to measure. So removing that 18 bolt's going to tell you that it's 120 millimeter. So if you have to look at your differential ring and pinion because we didn't mark it or we found one somewhere, the ring and pinion looking at the front of the axle, not sitting in the tractor, looking at the front of the axle is on the left hand side. The angle or the cut, which we use the slash mark, goes this direction. So when you peep in your hoe, your ring gear is going to be on the left and your cut of your pinion shaft will go that way. Top 2 holes are just for the technician's ports. Your mark numbers on your front cover, your mark numbers on your case, mark numbers on your final drive are always on the outside area, and a lot of times they are underneath, which this one is underneath. So to sell a good used axle, we don't sell a good used axle. We can only sell a certified axle. Certification for this axle is oil sample that's clean and a vertical axle test. So if you don't know what a vertical axle test is, that's why you're replacing your axle, because you don't do it. But a vertical axle test, you put the dial indicator onto your axle. There's a spacing here that's required. You zero it out, you do the process. If there's any movement in the axle shaft, you have a bearing that is going down. Doesn't mean it's failed, but it's going down. So if it fails for us or we have a dirty oil scan, we just send them straight to rebuild. New bearings, new seals, reassembled to OEM spec. Now one thing we've started doing, and until we get through old stock, we're going to encourage that you do it prior to install, because you'll have your fittings, and once you get all your fittings on, that you do a pressure test on the axle before you install it, just to make sure there's no leaks. It's a lot easier to make a fix at that point versus being up underneath the tractor.